And welcome to the June 4th, 2018 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 2 is public participation. Anyone that would like to speak under public participation, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. If you are a student, you just need your first name and grade. Seeing none, we will close public participation and go on to item number 3. That's the focus on the implementation of the elementary math program at James Master Call Elementary School, Reed's Ferry Elementary School, and Thornton's Ferry Elementary School. And I invite to the table administrators, educators, and students and to introduce as we go along. So thank you and welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much for having us this evening. We're very pleased to be here, and we're also pleased to be here as a cohort, meaning the 3 elementary schools presenting together as opposed to separately for an overview of the Envisions math program. This evening, the students are really going to be the voice, so everything that you will learn about the Envisions program will come directly from their testimonies. But I'm just going to give you some of the highlights so that you can be listening for these particular components as they go through and present at each of the grade levels K through 4. So some of the things, first of all, I'm Kimberly Yarlott, principal of Reed's Ferry School, my apologies. Michelle Romaine, principal of Mastercola Elementary School. Bridie Bellamere, principal of Thornton's Ferry Elementary School. And we have our assistants in the audience with us, Rachel Schneider from Reed's Ferry School, Julie DeLuca from Thornton's Ferry School, and we have Alicia Hanson-Prue from Mastercola Elementary School. We also have a plethora of students and educators who will introduce themselves as they come and present. So first of all, some of the key things that I want you to listen for as they present is the problem-solving learning. Lessons begin with an introduction of concepts and procedures that facilitate rich classroom conversations and result in deeper conceptual understanding. You will see examples of this. Lessons move from concrete to pictorial to abstract. Each lesson supports mathematical practices with interactive exploration. You will also hear about personalized and adaptive learning. Envisions makes learning personal. It adapts to the student's need through the digital platforms that are available, and this ensures that the students make progress towards proficiency at their level at any time, since it is a technologically adaptive program, that component of it. Envisions also provides opportunities for a variety of differentiation through their resources. There are tiered activities, learning centers, flexible groups, and technology that help accommodate learning styles. There's real-world application. So every lesson starts off with something that we will hear about tonight called Solve and Share. And this is prior to direct instruction. So it might be an example like this. It's a real world problem. Sebastian has 6 out of 8 of a full charge on his phone. He uses 2/8 of the full charge playing a game. What fraction of the full charge does Sebastian have left? So the students do this independently, and then we'll have rich conversations throughout the class talking about how they came up with the answer, if they came up with the answer, and the various ways they can come up with that answer. There's also a part of it that is called the performance assessment tasks, and I did provide some performance mats that are also part of the performance tasks that you'll have an opportunity to view later, and Mrs. Barnes is presenting one. So again, they're content-rich problem-solving activities that segue nicely into the grade level content, but also provide real-world application. So at the end of each topic, students engage in a performance task, which encourages them to use real-world examples and practical application to demonstrate their understanding of the mathematical concepts. Students are supported in utilizing a variety of strategies to solve and explain their knowledge. So what you'll find evident tonight is that there's lots of different ways to solve problems, and that students come to it in many, many creative ways. And then there's also discourse about what was the easiest strategy, what was maybe perhaps more complex, perhaps more abstract, and in some cases just purely visual. Then students showing how they were able to come to an answer. So as each group presents, it would be best if you asked any questions following each grade level, so that in the case that our youngest learners need to leave, they will have that opportunity. I'm going to pass it on to Michelle Rowan.
Thank you. Good evening. So Kim talked a little bit about the Envisions, and then that's what the primary focus of our presentation will be, but I wanted to take a minute before we move to that to remind you of the work that the Merrimack School District Math Committee did on the revision of the math curriculum. So as a reminder, the curriculum is what drives our instruction. The Envisions program is a resource that we're using in order to deliver our curriculum. The topics within the program are aligned with the College and Career Ready standards for instruction. The program is organized by various clusters of the math standards. Each lesson provides essential questions and enduring understandings to ensure students are meeting the expectations of the curriculum. Further, Envisions divides the program into major clusters, supporting clusters, and additional clusters. These are designed to allow teachers to teach to various levels of mastery, depending on what level of mastery is included in the standards or for that grade level. The teachers have worked together to examine the various topics and the students' mastery of skills. As necessary, the grade levels have moved the topics to meet the needs of their students. A large component of the standards is the focus on the mathematical practices. You will hear more about these practices and how they are embedded into the lessons. One of the reasons for the choosing of the Envisions math program was its alignment to the Merrimack School District's math curriculum. As with many initiatives in Merrimack, the elementary school teachers have worked to ensure that they are using this resource, the Envisions program, that aligns to our curriculum and best meets the needs of our students.
Good evening, everyone. So I have a very brief overview about the professional development piece, and then I'll turn things over to our educators and students. This past August, at our August Academy, we had the opportunity to bring in a trainer from Envisions that worked with the staff. They had an opportunity to work in grade level spans and really kind of start to deconstruct the program. And as Michelle had just previously shared, we work to make connections at PLTs throughout the fall with the curriculum and the program to look for alignment. Throughout the year, teachers collected various notes or data, questions, so when they came back together at PLTs, they had an opportunity to support one another. Also going back to the district math curriculum committee to brainstorm across in vertical teams and with math facilitators, Marcia McGill and Michelle Romaine, about what additional professional development needs they felt had arisen. We had a group of educators, I believe it was this past January, that began to share a little bit with the board about some things that they saw that were strengths in the program, some things that they thought that we still needed some more training on. So we continue to provide that training and encourage those dialogues at the building level. This fall we also did a train the trainer model where we sent people from each building to work with somebody, again, from Envisions, and then that party helped to train staff at PLTs in the building. Going forward, we're always about refinement, and as we continue to find ways to refine our practices, as with the implementation of any new resource or instructional tool, it really is about the conversation and just having open, transparent dialogue about what we're doing well and where we need help. And it's okay to ask for help, especially when we're learning something new. Moving forward, some of our action goals: continue the dialogue at PLTs, look for ways to enhance and access the technology components of the program and the home links, and to develop protocols for assessment practices that are uniform across the schools. So at this time, I would like to introduce the educators that are here this evening, and they'll introduce the students as they each begin the presentations. So our kindergarten staff, represented from Master Cole Elementary School, Kim Bolduck and Debbie Fournier. Over here. First grade, Sherry Rosswag from Reed's Ferry School, Second grade, Laura Howe from Thornton's Ferry. Marianne Sabat, special educator from Mastrocola. Kathy Rousseau, third grade teacher, Reed's Ferry School. And Noelle Rosenthwaite, fourth grade teacher from Reed's Ferry School.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Fournier, and I've brought with me a student from my morning kindergarten class.
Addie.
And I'm Kim Bolduck from Mastrocola Elementary as well, and my student is
Andre.
Great. Addie and I are going to talk about the solve and share portion of our math lesson. We begin this lesson each day with the solve and share. This part of the lesson engages the students by connecting their prior knowledge and connecting it with new ideas that they're learning about. So Addie, would you like to tell the board how we do our solve and share? Okay.
So Miss Fournier tells us what to do on the board, and then we go to the tables about 1 or 2 minutes, and then it doesn't matter if we get it right, or if we're not finished, because that's just practice. And then we go back to the carpet, and she tells us what to do for our regular math.
And then Addie, before we go back to the carpet, what do we do so that we can hear what everyone else has done? Can you tell them?
We go around to the other tables and see what other people did and see what their examples are, and they explain what they did.
And that will take us to the end of the solve and share, where we can learn from each other and we can use the strategies that some of their friends have implemented to get on to the next portion of the lesson. I don't think this is working. Maybe shut it off and turn it back on.
So after that, we do the visual learning bridge, which is a video that goes along with the solve and share. And it connects the students' thinking to the solve and share that they just worked on independently in class and then share it out. It also gives them ideas and examples for the upcoming lesson that day, which incorporates some of the independent work they'll have to do on their own. The video pauses throughout to give time for discussion, as well as to allow the children time to answer the questions being asked. Andre, would you like to share a little bit about the video?
We watched the video after solve and share. It has a spinning robot. The kids tell you what to do. In the middle, it pauses so you can answer it.
So we're just going to show you a quick little piece of one of them. They're usually 2 to 3 minutes, the videos. That's the robot they love.
Items are in a row when they are arranged in a line side by side. This chart shows 2 rows of numbers. What numbers are on the top row? 1 to 10 are on the top row. What numbers are on the bottom row? 11 to 20.
So the program
are on
is
the bottom
picked
row.
where you can pause, but oftentimes in the classroom we pause at these spots as well so that the children can actually answer the question instead of waiting all the way to the end. So I find that we pause a lot more often than the program actually has put into the video, just so the children can listen and process what's going on.
Find the blue number on the number chart. Count forward until you reach the stop sign. What numbers?
Do you have any questions for our kindergartners?
Are there any questions from the board? I have one. What do you like about the way they teach math this year? Not that you know any other year, but what do you like about math? We don't even know about any other year. It's a new program.
That it helps us learn.
That's a great answer.
I like it when we do it because it's fun.
Math is fun. This is good. Thank you very much. Good job, kindergarten.
Hello. Hello, I'm Sherry Roswag. I'm from Reeds Ferry School, and today I have some of my first grade students with me, and they're going to talk about a complete lesson.
Hi, my name is Andra Kovacs.
Hi, my name is Cash Torres. Why does each lesson have an essential question or an I can statement?
To get us started on the new topic, and it's gonna explain before the visual learning. What is visual learning?
It's when we go down to the rug and watch a video, and Mrs. Roswag will pause it when they ask us questions. And there's a try it question sometimes, and when there's hard questions, they put on a try it arrow. What is do you understand?
It's when you show what you know about the I can statement. Why do we have guided practice problems?
Because Mrs. Roswag will guide us through the problems, and we do it together. What do we do during the independent practice?
Independent practice might be different. So Ms. Roswag will show us the first one, and then we'll do it all by ourselves because we do it all by ourselves. Can you explain what is a higher order thinking question?
It's when we have to use what we know from the independent practice and the guided practice.
It's also a checkup.
What is the math practice and problem solving part?
It's when you have to be precise.
What does that mean?
Use the example.
I don't really know what it means.
Do you want to help her?
It's when we have to try our best to get it right.
The one that's right is the one with four shares and equal shares. Red. Why is there an assessment question for each lesson?
Ms. Roswag will check if we understand the I can statement.
Do you want to say which one's the answer?
And the answer on the assessment question is the one that only has 3 shares.
Which is D. I want to add that in.
Thank you so much for your time. Our first graders didn't have a script. They just had the questions written down.
Okay.
So they were really talking from their own point of view and what they see during a lesson. If you have
Good.
any questions for us.
Are there questions for the first grade? Cinda?
Actually, I would say I have questions regarding instruction regarding first grade. Because the program is developed with the understanding that I think that most of the kids that get this program across the country have full-day kindergarten. So I was just curious how you manage that. And, of course, this upcoming year you'll have the same thing, and if there's any lessons learned or anything you can do to help that learning instruction, particularly in the first grade level.
Sure. I know that I talked at a different school board meeting about our first topic in first grade, which is word problems, which is really challenging for our first graders because a lot of them coming in can't read those questions. So what I found earlier in the year is that independent practice piece wasn't really independent practice. That's when we were still doing a lot of guided practice. I would have to read the questions to each of the students every single time. So we were almost doing a lot of whole group. I would do that part also during center, so that was what they were working on with me, rather than some of the other components that the program has. However, now the students can read, and now that students are feeling successful, that they do that independent practice piece completely by themselves. So I'm hoping that with full day kindergarten that we'll see our students coming in with a little bit more of a readability, so they will be able to succeed right off the bat with our math program.
So what you're saying is as their reading skills have developed throughout the year, you're not noticing as much of that issue that you would see at the beginning of the year.
Correct.
Are there any other questions? See, I thought you guys did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Laura Howe, and I teach second grade at Thorntons Ferry Elementary School, and this is my second grade student,
Ariana Monroy.
And the part of the lesson that we are going to talk about today is where we assess and differentiate, so all the students are getting what they need to move forward with their learning around a certain skill or concept. I thought it would be better to show you what it looks like in action in the classroom, so I have some photographs to share. And Ariana and I looked at the photographs together in the classroom, and she's going to be sharing from a student's perspective what the photograph is showing, and I'm going to share from a teacher's perspective what the photographs are showing. So this first picture right here is the independent practice. These are those questions, so I checked off one on this slide, and Noelle, the next slide too. Those are what the students, after the lesson's been taught, they work on those independently to the best that they can solve them. And I look at those questions and see how the kids solve them, and I make groups from that. So the groups, it's important to know that they're flexible and they can change every day depending on how the students do that with those checking questions, and that the photographs that you're going to see are all happening at the same time in the classroom. So this first one in the first couple pictures, this is the intervention activity. This is where the students need more instruction at the concrete level. So as you can see, we are subtracting, but the students are using base 10 blocks to help them subtract.
This is math group when our teacher, Mrs. Howe, I feel like I learn more in this group because when I am stuck, she helps me learn more about subtraction so I understand what I am doing. We are doing an activity together using base 10 blocks and a place value mat to help us subtract. I see the numbers better this way and it helps me regroup.
This center is where the students get more practice with the skill from the lesson through a game. So this is the on-level center. Students work together to talk about how they arrive at the answer. Students in this group are working at the pictorial stage, where they benefit from drawing base 10 blocks out to help them subtract.
I love this center because you get to play a math game with a partner to practice subtraction. When I was playing with my partner, there was 2 zeros in the ones and the tens place. So we had to go all the way to the hundreds place to regroup. I like playing these games because partners can help each other and the games are fun.
This is called the Reteach Center. So this center also gives students more practice by providing them with a visual model. So this is also the pictorial stage. Students in this group are seeing base 10 blocks already drawn out for them in the problem to help them be able to subtract.
This activity gives examples by showing with pictures that help me remember how to solve it. The students are practicing regrouping in this picture.
And then this last picture, this is the Advanced Activity Center. In this center, students are working at the abstract level where they're able to use just the numbers to subtract and regroup. And on the whiteboards is nice for them to be able to explain their thinking to each other using precise math vocabulary, regrouping, why they need to regroup, ones place, tens place, hundreds place. So that's an independent activity where they're working together.
In this group, we are ready to explain how we solve subtraction problems using words like hundreds, tens, and ones, and most importantly, regrouping. We use the whiteboards to show our partner what we are saying to help our partner understand. I feel happy at math because the games help me practice more and feel more confident. I feel like I understand subtraction better and can talk about my learning.
Are there any questions for Ariana or myself?
Are there any questions from the board? So I do have one question for you, Ariana. You're saying that with these games, it helps you to like math. Did you always like math, or is this a new way and now you like math because of it?
I always liked math.
Did you? So do you like math better now than you did last year?
I like it. I like it a little bit more.
Okay. Then we did something right. Thank you very much.
Envisions intervention system. With all the awesome teaching that's going on.
Is your mic on? Is it glowed? Is it illuminated?
I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. No,
Okay.
happens all the time.
I'll start over. So I'm Mary Ann Sabat, special education teacher at James Mastrocola Elementary School. And I'm here to talk about the Envisions intervention system. Like I was saying, all the amazing teaching that goes on in the classroom, even despite that, sometimes a child doesn't catch on to a skill or isn't understanding a concept. So that concept needs to be retaught. And that's where this system comes in. I have some highlights up on the screen, so we can go through that. The intervention lessons in this box correspond with each topic and each lesson that's presented throughout the year in each classroom. The intervention lessons also correspond with specific Common Core standards. The teachers can choose from a variety of intervention lessons that address specific underlying skills needed. So there are so many different skills. I'll get to that in just a second. And all of these skills, they're to be mastered by students in order to narrow that gap between what they can do now and what they need to do at grade level. Another great thing is the lessons follow the same format and use the same language as the classroom lessons do. I find, and I want to note this, The language component of the Envisions math program is very rigorous in vocabulary and in sentence complexity. So during my intervention lessons with my students who have difficulty with language comprehension, I directly teach the vocabulary first and explain what's being asked so that they can solve the problem independently. So sometimes those two things have to be done before we get to the math concepts. And the children are doing very well with it. Sometimes I have to go not just one grade level below, but even two, depending. So we want to get that baseline. What can they do? Sometimes they can do certain skills at grade level, but then there are other skills that they can't do at grade level. So you find, well, where can they do it? Can they do it? I teach second grade, so can they do it at first grade? If not, can they do it in kindergarten? So we get that baseline. The next one is the lessons provide teacher-directed reteaching, guided practice, and independent practice. The kid also provides structured opportunities to supplement the lessons with visuals, math tools, and manipulatives for hands-on learning by seeing, hearing, and doing. And I'm sure we've all heard the research that the best way to learn for retention of skills, for understanding of concepts, is through manipulatives. Every student for this program, every student is given a set of these. I myself have been using these base 10 blocks for many, many years. They're a highlight, and the kids enjoy them. The Unifex cubes to understand 10, base 10. Same thing with the base 10 blocks. There's a set of coins that the children use. So it's great to have those manipulatives. So now I want to get into the box a little bit. So this is step one. This is these are the tests. I have them labeled, just kind of tagged. The pink are the pre-tests, Form A, and the blue are the post-tests, Form B. So I use the pre-tests to find out, okay, what can the student do? What are they proficient in, and at what level? And I find the areas of need. And then I teach that for a while, and then I give the post-test to see if they've grown in all these areas. Now, usually by the time I give the post-test, I know they've grown because I see it on a day-to-day. But I still give it. It's good data, and it's good. I share it with the classroom teacher, and you can share it with parents as well. Let's see if there's anything else I want to note on that. These tests and all the lessons in here, oh yeah, we talked about that. They follow the same format, which is very helpful for the students. And then this is the teacher's guide. It guides the teacher in creating a plan of intervention. It lists all the lessons in books A to E that address the specific skills needed. So these are books A to E, right here. Okay, so book A addresses numbers, place value, money, and patterns. B addresses basic facts. C addresses computation with whole numbers. D addresses measurement, geometry, data analysis, and probability. And E addresses problem solving. So, like even today, I just went through, I gave one child a pretest on measurement, geometry, and analysis, and another with numbers, place value, money, and patterns. And I analyzed it, and I figured out, okay, so these are the skills we need to work on. It's noted that, like with 66% accuracy, you know, they're doing not too badly, but I don't know, I like to shoot for way up there. I don't want them to miss any skill. I feel it's so important that we address every skill. Like if they get one skill wrong, I still want to address it, and I want to make sure that they're confident in it before they go on and just say, okay, they passed that assessment, we can go on now. I'm not like that. I really want them to know every single skill. So anyway, are there any questions? That's pretty much it.
All right, so firstly, Andy.
So I have a couple questions. So
sure.
At what point is it decided that a child needs intervention? What's the tipping point?
Okay, well, it pretty much starts with a consult. I have teacher consults every week. I consult with every classroom teacher. So we talk about how are they doing in math. You know, we look at the teachers' data collection, how they do on this test, how they're doing in everyday situations. And if there's someone struggling, I'll say, okay, well, let me check it. And so I can check through here. That's how it starts. And I hope that answers the question, actually. So it starts with that consult, and we find, okay, this child is struggling with money what can you do? So we narrow in and we form a plan on how to address and how to intervene.
So I guess the question I have is, it's a process. You identify that where there's a deficiency or a area they need to grow.
Right.
Then you work with them to help them to make up that deficiency.
That's right.
When does that happen during a day?
Oh, we have an intervention block, and I also push into the classroom. I set up with the teachers a certain time, and I call them my math rotations. I set it up with the teachers so that I'm not taking away from instructional time. I always make sure that I go in when the teacher is not directly teaching the students, so they can be involved in one of the centers or whatever. And they have time to do that on another day because the centers rotate, so that they don't lose out on that either. So that's when I get in there. And even if it's 10, 15 minutes a day, but it's still, it's that consistency. It's better than doing like 1 half hour, maybe twice a week. That's not as effective, really, as doing it every day for 15 minutes, at least 3 days in a row.
Okay, and one final question.
Sure.
So given this is the first year for this program, and you probably won't know the answer, but do you think that as kids go through the program up for the younger grades, the interventions will be less frequent? Do you think it'll be more into the flow? I mean, I know everybody needs differentiated learning.
Sure.
But do you think that the way that things are presented will help kids be more into the flow?
I think we can say, let's be hopeful. Let's be hopeful that that might happen. I have really no way of predicting at this point. I love the instruction. Again, the only thing that I'm working with a little bit heavier is on the vocabulary and sentence complexity. With that taken away and that addressed, both, the kids are really doing a nice job. So yeah, let's be hopeful. Maybe.
Well, I think it may be one of the ways that we can gauge whether this change in curriculum and the tools that we use help. I mean, it won't be definitive because there's obviously multiple factors that come into play, but it will be one of the things that we can look at potentially.
Absolutely. And your population is changing all the time. There might be a year where, wow, like this looks great, but then another year where there might be some kids that just, for some reason, they just struggle, with certain concepts, and it just doesn't come as easily.
Yep.
So, but we're ready to take that on.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have one because clearly you've been doing interventions before this program has introduced itself.
Yes.
How has the structure of this program helped you in supporting student outcomes?
Well, this is actually, it makes it easier for me because everything is right here, okay? And I don't have to go like searching for a lot of different things. The lessons are right in here. They pertain exactly to the lesson being taught in the classroom. So I don't know, those are good positives.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Russo, and I'm a third grade teacher at Reed's Ferry. Today, my students are going to be talking about performance assessments. They are at the end of every topic, and basically it's the math concepts that they have learned. They learn to apply them to real-world problems using their mathematical reasoning. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm William Morris.
And I'm Josie Riggy. We're third graders at Reed's Ferry School.
We're going to be talking about a performance assessment. Anita and her brother Logan make plans for a family reunion. Use the fruit bot table to answer the question. Logan estimated the mass of the fruit. He forgot to include the unit of mass for each item. Explain if he used gram or kilogram. So for the bag of grapefruit, it is 4 kilograms. Because if it was 4 grams, it wouldn't make any sense because the grapefruit is heavy and 4 grams is way too light. 4 grams would be like 4 grapes. 1 lemon is probably 90 grams because 90 kilograms is way too heavy. And 90 kilograms would be like about as heavy as a desk. The watermelon would be 3 kilograms because it is huge and heavy. If it was, it would make 0 sense to make to be 3 grams.
Use the mass of 1 lime art to answer the question. Each lime has a mass shown at the right. What is the mass of 1 lime? 30 grams. I know this because 10 times 3 is 30. And it was in grams because the weight of 30 kilograms would be approximately 30 books. And the symbol was a G.
Use the mass of 1 lime of art. Logan needs to buy at least 200 grams of limes. He plans to buy 7 limes. Will he buy enough? Use your response to part A to explain. Yes, he has enough because I would do 7 times 30, but instead of that, I do 7 times 3 is 21, and then add a 0, and then it would be 210.
Use the liquids needed table to answer the question. Logan measures the liquids they need. Complete the table to show if Logan should use liters or milliliters to measure each ingredient based on each container. A milliliter is like a drop of water, and a liter is like 2 Poland Spring water bottles. A spoonful of vinegar would be measured in millimeters. A measuring cup of milk would be millimeters because it's not as big as a water bottle. A pot of water would be measured in liters because you can fit 5 water bottles in a pot.
So that is our explanation. When it comes to these performance assessments, we do performance tasks to apply what we've learned. Do you have any questions for us?
Are there any questions from the board? Do you use these tools at home? No?
No.
Not yet? Maybe not yet? If you want to start cooking? So mommy doesn't have to? No, maybe not. I'm trying for the next generation. It didn't work for me. So, well, thank you very much. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
So Jordan is here from 4th grade. His partner was unable to make it, so Jordan's going to carry on and do the whole thing on his own.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm in 4th grade at Reed's Ferry School. We use technology a lot in our classroom, and our new math program has a lot of ways to use computers when learning math. We're going to talk about a few of those things. You can log into the math program from anywhere you have the internet. You can use it on any device, even a phone. All you need to do is go to the school website and click on the P for Power School. Use your name and school ID number to log in. Click on the Pearson course on the left, and you can watch all of the learning videos and play lots of learning games. You can even find the homework on there if your dog ate your paper copy. There's an online game center with lots of activities to practice what we've learned in class. You can play them anytime. They even have an easier and harder version of the games if you need more practice or a greater challenge. In the game Goblin Globs, You practice place value and multiplying by tens to create large numbers. My favorite game is Amazing Savings. In this game, you have to go through a maze collecting cheese with numbers on them. It teaches you about money and how to save. We take most of our math tests on the computer. One good thing about that is that you can get your score immediately after finishing, instead of waiting forever for your teacher to correct them. You can see what you got right and what was tricky for you. Afterward, you can play games and watch videos for more practice and on what you need help with. The program automatically assigns these activities for you. Thank you for your time. We really enjoyed our new math program this year and hope that you've been hearing about it tonight. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, Cinda?
Yeah, when the class takes its quizzes, how do you take turns with the computer, or do you go to the computer lab? How does everyone do it on the computer?
We have a cart of our own assigned laptops, so we go onto the laptops and sign in and do our tests.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So I also had a question on quizzes. How do you show your work so you know how you got to the answers?
We usually have our teacher has a special paper that we use, and it's set up with the numbers for the questions, and sometimes she puts stars on them, and the stars means that it's required to show your work on that question. And if they don't have stars, you can just use it if you need help and to write stuff down on it.
So that way, if you didn't get the right answers, they can at least
Yeah.
figure out how you got the answer you got, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Makes some sense. Good. Are there any other questions? Great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We want to thank you once again for Oh, no, it's not. No, just pretend. Just pretend. I just wanted to also respond to your question about the interventions and when do they take place. In fact, in the classroom, they take place every day by the classroom teacher. This program is beautifully tiered, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So what was being shared with you was the most intensive materials that are used for Tier 3 instruction for those students who need something above and beyond what's in the classroom. But what I'm most fascinated about with this program is how well it really does differentiate. So if a student is struggling, and as you saw in the visuals with the various learning centers, that it's broken down so that if you're, if you're excelling quite nicely and you really have strong understanding, you're going to be working at the abstract level. But if you are needing some more of the intervention, you're going to be working closely with those manipulative visual levels. So the interventions are ongoing every day with the classroom teachers, and then there's that opportunity for a more intensive instruction at the Tier 3 level. So I just wanted to point that out to you.
Andy?
So that's really good. I mean, differentiated and being able to handle is really good. Is there a bar that you use where you expect a student to be at the end of a year before they move to the next in terms of learning and comprehension to move to the next one?
So there is an end of the year and a beginning of the year assessment built in, and we will share those end of the year assessments. And if you have anything to offer, please come up too as well. But those end of the year assessments will be used and analyzed by the next year's teachers to determine how they might start off grouping their kids right from the start. And then the beginning of the year assessment will also sort of verify if if those skills are concrete or if they need some reteaching. We'll also use the end of the year assessment to determine any Title I students as one of the indicators where a child might need another, perhaps a Tier 2 level of instruction. But to be quite honest with you, we have yet to have determined what that cutoff is, say, for example, 80%, 75%, 70%, because we're still getting to know the program. And in fairness, when we gave the beginning of the year assessment, it was quite interesting because we were down in the 30s and 40s because it was material that hadn't been taught through the program the way that the program is designed for it to be taught. But increasingly at the end of the units and as we've given assessments, we've noticed much more success as we've gone along.
Right. Well, I was getting when we were talking about the interventions, is obviously this is the first year, so when you get into the flow, starting from kindergarten all the way up, you get into a cadence both for the teachers as well as the students to understand what it is. So it's a little unfair asking the question for the first year, but it'll be interesting to see as we go through the subsequent years is how it improves, how it evolves, how it changes. So.
Exactly, and we will have a lot of data, a lot of benchmark points, formative, summative data to be able to make the determination on the true success of students. But that's going to take it's going to take some time to be able to analyze it, and that's one of the things that Principal Bellemare had mentioned as a future goal is for us to be able to look at those assessments in a more comprehensive and also uniform manner.
Are there any other questions? Cinda?
It's not so much a question, but maybe just a request that we continue to keep the math curriculum at the forefront. I know we do like the quarterly curriculum reviews at the board, but it's such an important undertaking that to continue to have regular updates would be really appreciated.
Sounds good. So this definitely, from all we've seen tonight, has been a positive impact on the elementary level. So we thank you for sharing how it really does become alive in the classroom. Obviously, we know what we as parents saw our kids learning when in the classroom, and the feedback that we had. I remember going to the math night when we launched the Everyday Math program, and this definitely seems like a lot more tangible for even parents to be able to support at home. So this is definitely really, I see it just getting all these objectives taken care of with a lot of ability to transition to parent support as well. So it took a lot of research and a lot of work. So to the math committee, thank you. I know I think you made a great choice based on the feedback we got tonight from the students. They really seem to really enjoy math and can explain to us what they're learning in the classroom. So this is exactly what we come here for. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
So. And we're on to item number 4. We'll return these to Reed's Ferry through the superintendent's office. So we are on to item number 4, which is the formal signing of the master agreement between the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association and the Merrimack School Board. So I invite to the table President of MESA, Carol Scopa, Chief Negotiator, Carolyn Belfiore, and Kimberly Gontars.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I'll start again. Good evening. My name is Carol Scoper, and I'm the president of the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association, referred to as MESA. We're here tonight. Here with me tonight is Carolyn Belfiore, who is our negotiator, and Kim Gontars, who is MESA's treasurer, but on the board, she was our representative for our library assistants, and she also did all our paperwork and all our TAs and all our negotiations and all that. So we're all here tonight for the formal signing of our master agreement between the MESA and the school board. I would like to express on behalf of MESA our sincere thanks to Naomi Schofield, Shannon Barnes, Mark McLaughlin, Matt Chavanel, and Linda Hastings for all their time and support, and also their constructive and open exchange throughout our recent negotiations. MESA feels that this new contract is an equitable one. Also, I'd like to thank Marge and the whole board, and also the public, for their continuing support of MESA in the passage of the contract. So thank you.
Thank you. We also appreciate the efforts put in by MESA, the compromises that were made so we could bring a fair and equitable contract to the people for the vote. So thank you again, and we look forward to 3 years of great work in the classroom.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Carol, you're the chairperson. Okay. Oh. There you go. Who's not with us tonight is our treasurer.
No, secretary.
Secretary, rather. She's my treasurer. And Deb Donahue. I'm sure we'll get her to sign it at some point. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep that with our stuff.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Let's just shake your hands.
And thank you for being the runners. We're always usually huddled over a table looking like we have terrible posture. So, excellent. So we're on to item number 5, which is the update on the Brentwood property. So I invite to the table Brian Hansen and Tony Basso. Did I get it right, Basso? I hope so. I'm Italian. It sounds Italian. So. Okay. And the mic is on when it's glowing green.
Yeah. So we have two entities here. Tony's from Keach Nordstrom, who did the survey and the plot plan of the building, which is the exterior, how it falls on the land. And Brian is from Team Engineering, who did the interior inspections and has information on that. So it's up to you as to whom you would like to present first or second.
We may want to go with the plot plan, so that way when we talk about what's in the plot plan, it's more contextual. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sounds great.
Hi, my name's Tony Basso with Keach Nordstrom. I'm actually filling in for my business partner, Steve Keach, who's in the Caribbean. So we surveyed the property. I know there was some concern about whether the building was on the property. It is completely on the property by 1 foot. There's some fencing that's over the line. There's some parking along Brentwood that's over the line. But everything else is in there. The current zoning, though, setbacks, it's spread all over the setbacks, so it's a pre-existing non-conforming situation, but adding on to that would mean expansion of pre-existing non-conforming, so there might be some stuff that has to be dealt with at local level. I don't know if this town makes you go through the boards or not for this school stuff. There's a state RSA that says you don't have to, but some towns make you do it. If you do, you'd have to do expanding. If you were going to do something with this, altering it, you may have to take a trip to the zoning board for that, depending on how they handle stuff here. Pretty much other than that, the title was fairly simple. We didn't come across any problems in the work that we do. We don't look for liens and attachments or anything like that. We look at the actual transfer title, what the deed looks like, what the chain of deeds look like, and we compare them to the other deeds, and all that stuff all worked really well. So overall, it's a pretty solid plan. No issues other than, the fact that this was done a long time ago when probably a different set of rules applied, but at least it's all on the property. So.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I also have, I know we gave electronic stuff, but I have full-size plans that I can leave with you guys. So they're a little easier to see.
Thank you very much. You notice the glasses on my head. Andy.
So I'm looking at the plot plan, and I see where the corner was within 1 foot of the property line, but the fence is obviously way over.
Yeah, the fence is over.
And there it's encroaching.
Yeah.
I can't tell the scale, but at least 10 feet. It looks like
it's
into the next property.
Well, it's more than I've got a scale. It's close to 15 feet, I think. That it approaches. Yeah, it's about 13 and a half, 14 feet is the worst. Where the
into the house that's next to it.
Into the property next door, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, if we did something different to the footprint of the building, we'd have to.
That's
all those grandfathered things go away.
Yeah, that's when you'd have to. So if you expand the building footprint, typically, and I do mostly private side, so that's why my business partner does municipal type work. I do private side work.
Sure.
So if you were hiring me as a private individual, if you were going to expand this in any town, pretty much, you'd have to do. If you're expanding a non-conforming building, there's actually a section of the zoning that deals with that, and you're required to go to the zoning board to expand. It would require a variance, actually, in the private side. And the reason why I say on municipal side, there is a state RSA that actually says you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. However, every town handles that individually.
Sure.
The city of Nashua makes you go through it as if you were a private developer. I just did one in Hudson where we didn't even step foot in the planning board room at all. So for a fire station, we just designed it, and we started construction. So the RSAs are there for municipal, but a lot of towns don't follow them. They look for transparency and make the town go through the same process that an individual citizen would have to go through.
Sure.
This town, I don't know how they handle that. So I
guess we'll
just
find
pointed
out.
out in the private sector world I work in, that would be required. And in many municipal sectors, it would be required. Right. Some of them don't. Some of them will let you go through without it, but not many.
Having gone through, if I could just try and illuminate a little bit on, having been through several building projects in Merrimack, it would be a mistake not to go through the fire chief. We would obviously go in front of the zoning board, the planning board. We did that with the middle school when we built that and went through there with the understanding that, and I talked with Tim Thompson last week, who's the community development director, that, you know, we're exempt from all of these zoning standards. But as a courtesy, it's good to have them on board and good to hear their opinions and you know, the abutters before we do anything that would change the footprint or the design of that. And I'm not really sure whose fence that is. I think that may be the neighbor's fence, but I'm not quite sure.
It's attached. It looks like the only reason why I'm not sure that is because it attaches to the building.
Yeah.
In the front corner, and then it wraps around the back and attaches to the back corner of the building. So
Yeah.
it looks like it's trying to fence in this, but maybe maybe this could easily be that this is that person's fence,
Yeah.
and they just made a leg to it, you know, to tie it off.
That's what I think so, because we went and we took a look at it, myself and Tom Tussaud, and it does, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it was something, obviously, we'd have a conversation with the homeowner next door, which we already have had, and we would come to something more than agreeable to make sure they're happy in their situation, and we don't, you know, kind of upset their existence. We would keep them whole and in a good situation, if not better.
Right. The takeaway I have by looking at the plan is it's interesting because the plot of land is sort of like a parallelogram, so to speak,
Yep.
and the building structure, if you take the nooks and crannies, is like a rectangle stuck sideways in the parallelogram. So it was kind of interesting how it grew over time. sort of opposite of the way that the land went. So
Unfortunately, we see that often, because when you create these lots, they're created with zoning and stuff in mind and privately owned, and so sometimes the lines get racked a little, and they don't realize that they make the building, either parallel with the frontage, and then it's like in the case of my parents' house, the building's parallel with the front of the road, but the back corner of the house is over the property line, because the property lines are like this, and the house is parallel with the road, and so the whole thing goes. That's how this happens. They lay out that building. They're thinking, oh, we're just straight with the road, but the actual lines aren't. So, and the further you go back, the worse that gets. Or forward in this case. Maybe they started. Who knows? Where they started building from, but. That's unfortunately very common when you see those slanted side lines like that, just the way it was cut up, so people assume perpendicular, but they're not, and get surprised. It happens a lot.
So are there any questions about the plot plan? So far, we're good. On to the survey.
My name is Brian Hanson. I'm a project manager for Team Engineering out of Bedford, New Hampshire. We do structural engineering and property inspection reports. I have seen this building twice over the last couple of years for the current owner and for you folks. And most recently, I did a survey of the building where not much had changed in the year or so that had passed. And if you wish, I could sort of give you my characterization of the building, or if you folks would just like to get to questions, that'd be fine too.
I think a characterization would definitely help for the people at home that don't have our documents.
Sure. The building is a one-story wood frame building. About probably 25% of it stands on a full-height cast concrete foundation. That 25% of the building is the original part of the building, as I see it. That building was built in, I think, 1963. And I think there have been multiple additions, and those are all built in concrete slabs. Tony's information about the footprint of the building might have the people at home thinking, geez, could we add on to that building? It's possible you could add on to the part with the full head foundation. However, the slabs would be infinitely difficult to build on top of. So expanding on the building might have its challenges, but certainly it sounds like Matt has gone through that before and certainly can handle that quite well. The building, in my opinion, is in pretty good shape. Clearly, it's been used over the years. I think they've been taking pretty good care of it, but just by virtue of it being a main building with lots of additions on it over the last 50 years or so, there's no continuity between the electrical systems or the HVAC systems or anything like that. It's been much like you would expect it. Sort of decentralized systems, decentralized electrical panels, decentralized air conditioning, decentralized heat. And in the end of my report, which I could tell you about, but I guarantee you it's going to rock you to sleep, there are suggestions I made about an HVAC system, about upgrading the electrical system, and a variety of different improvements you could make with cost associated to it.
Okay. Are there questions of the board of the survey? Andy?
So one of the, at least for me anyway, because just as for context, I'm the liaison at the Planning Building Committee, so, and I'm also a liaison, that's what I am, into CERES, so I've had a lot of familiarity with what it was used for before and stuff like that. So one of the reasons I wanted to have it looked at was to make sure there weren't any things we didn't expect in it, any hazardous materials or any major errors or major problems before we sign, because when we go to close on it later this summer. And the only thing that I saw, which was expected, was the asbestos in the tiles only in the furnace room. So is it accurate to say that those were tiles put in probably for the fire retardants only within that room? Do you think that's the exposure that we have for asbestos?
No, Andy, that's a great question. When this building was built, they were still using asbestos on a pretty wide scale. Believe it or not, asbestos is very durable material. That's kind of one of the problems with it. Once sort of the fibers get into your lungs,
right.
It causes a variety of health issues. Certainly, over the years, most people have abated or covered or enclosed or encapsulated asbestos hazards in their buildings. And that probably wasn't added for fire retardant purposes. It was probably added because back in the 60s, the really good flooring was usually made out of asbestos. And very often, as I do property inspections, and I do lots of them, usually the asbestos looks pretty good. That's the problem. It looks pretty good. The stuff really lasts for a long time, just like the brake pads did years ago, and just like the friable insulation other places did. So no, I don't think it was a heat. I don't think it was an element that they put in there for the heat. I think it was just the floor. And if it's okay, I don't. I want to raise your attention. I want to draw your attention to the report that came in today. I got the property survey to you folks a couple days ago in advance of this meeting. We only got the asbestos survey back today, the complete asbestos survey back today, and of course it indicated what most people already knew. I want to, there's something that doesn't exist in the asbestos survey that I think I should make you folks aware of as I've been thinking about it. The floor that exists in the basement downstairs is made out of 12 by 12 VCT tiles, vinyl tiles, those big square tiles you sometimes see in supermarkets. Those were probably put in over a floor that previously had those tiles. You asked me about, if it was flame retardant. No, it's just a really good tile floor. The mastic, the glue that's below those tiles, the asbestos tiles, probably exists under those VCT tiles. Technically, a good asbestos person would tell you that because it's enclosed underneath those tiles, it doesn't represent a hazard. I just want to make you. I think I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention that the mastic that's below those tiles is very likely the same mastic that was tested underneath the oil tank. So it's very likely that an asbestos hazard exists below those tiles. That's all. I just figured I'd tell you folks.
Do you think there's any other, sometimes you see on renovation shows there's asbestos and old heating ducts and things like that. Do you think that exists within the building, or are we talking just about the tiles based on what you've seen? Well, sometimes, around like heating, you see when they tear apart a wall, they see a heating duct that's wrapped in asbestos or things like that. But a lot of those are older houses, pre-60s.
Totally legitimate question, Andy. I'm afraid I didn't do any invasive inspection of the ducts, the ductwork. However, I do know one thing. The RTU, the rooftop unit, the HVAC system for the center of the building is on the roof. And I ran the serial numbers on that unit last time I did the inspection. I think it was from the 80s. I think it's unlikely that those ducts that were, I think it's likely that the ducts that were put in for that RTU were probably put in about the same time, and that was post using asbestos in construction. But I think that's likely, and I acknowledge that I just went on TV saying that, and that could be the end of my career. But still, I think it's unlikely. However, I think there's a value in if you have a suspicion of it. I think there's a value in getting it tested.
Okay.
Could I ask?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Of course you can. No, I was just making sure.
No.
Go ahead.
Okay. Any of the floor tiles that you did you see any that were friable that caused an imminent threat?
No. The general definition of friable that we use is usually if you can crush it by your hands. Those materials that were in there are very durable materials.
Yeah.
They were in an exclusive place that was very hard to access, pretty much without a key. I don't think it represents a friable asbestos danger that might result in airborne hazard.
Are there any other questions about the engineering study? Seeing none, this is very comprehensive. It gives us, just so you know what we read, what you call bored to tears, but this is
Thanks.
What I like. It gives you kind of an immediate 1 year, what needs to be done 2 to 5 years, and then 6 to 10, and a total over that period of suggested maintenance to get things exactly where we want them to be. So when it comes to the existing footprint, just as it is, it gives us kind of a game plan for budgeting and for any large projects as well. So, Cinda?
I would just say if I would just request that we could put this on our website, if anyone wants to see it. And I don't know, how do we get this to our planning and building committee as well? We'll get a copy to them. Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that, Shannon. At Team Engineering, we do a lot of capital reserve studies for condominium communities. And over the years, we've sort of blended the two, and people really like that, especially investors. They really like to know what their capital reserves expenses are going to be years down the road. And it's a valuable tool. Thanks for pointing it out.
Absolutely. We live by ours, so it's a valuable tool for us to project everything from bonded debt and how it's going to impact the the tax rate to large projects. So
Yeah, certainly.
we try to stabilize the tax rate, and that's a valuable tool for us. So I'm glad you do it in your other practice as well. So I'm sure.
Thanks.
Very helpful.
And if I could add just one thing, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
I had the pleasure of listening to the presentations by the younger folks, and I was watching your faces, and I think it's not lost on me that the future, that young people are very important in so many ways, but it's pretty rare that we sit around and talk about it. And I think that what you folks are doing is phenomenal. I think that as somebody who is a father and a coach and tries to do things that are gonna make tomorrow a little bit better than today, I think it's really great that you folks are here working hard, and I could tell in your faces when those little guys were up there talking about their stuff that you folks were into it. So I want to applaud you folks. It made me feel really good, so thanks for that.
Thank you. We
Yeah,
appreciate
cheers.
it. And thank you for coming on this Monday night, so warm and okay. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, and give Steve Keach our regards
Yes.
while he's...
We could have taken a recess and gone to the Caribbean and just picked up there, but we weren't given that option. I don't know why. So, thanks, guys. I'm sorry? We're going to put the reports and everything that was presented tonight on our website for review.
I had some comments about it.
Okay, we have...
Other sections, so
yeah, that's it.
I won't waste your time with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
So we're on to item number 6, which is the final outcome of the homework protocol for the 2017-2018 school year, and I will turn it over to Mark.
Oh, there's my friend. How's it going? All right, how are you? Really good. I left the remote. All right, Justin. Should be able to just sit through it. Hit the button here. There we go.
So welcome, Mark. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'll be with you shortly.
There it goes. It's like the silence in radio sometimes. You just have
There
to
we
fill
go.
it.
Yes. I can juggle, but I probably won't.
Totally fine.
Perfect. All right. So good evening. I'm just going to wait 1 second while it's warming up. It's on my computer, so I think you'll see it shortly, the PowerPoint slide. There we go. Okay. So thank you for allowing me to speak about this tonight, and for allowing us the opportunity to engage in this initiative this year. And so my goal tonight is to kind of have a sort of a so what to this point. So I think it's important to just go forward and talk about now by just taking a little bit of a step back in time, because I think it's important for folks to understand how it is that we even began to address these questions and to commence this initiative. So over the number of years that I've been here, people have communicated with me in a variety of ways about concerns that they've had about our homework practices. And I have up on the first slide some sort of distillation of what those things are. So parents, over time, in a variety of contexts, have said there's too much homework. The homework doesn't appear to be connected to the learning that students are doing in class, that therefore it's not really necessary. Some parents have expressed concerns that it could kill an average. Students have talked about there being too much homework. Some have said, why bother, it isn't even checked. Some have said it isn't what I need. Some have said, I just do it for the credit. Teachers have talked about why bother? It isn't completed. It's not carefully done. It isn't helping the students. Students lack independence. So over a period of time, these issues have been brought to my attention. And, you know, I think as educators, we're always seeking ways to improve upon past practice, to provide a better service to our clients, who are our students, and our parents as well. And so we take these things seriously. So when enough people say there's something that we're a little bit concerned about, it's important to try to address it as best we can. And so we did. You may have seen this before, the definition of, and I'm not going to complete it. It was often attributed to Albert Einstein, but he didn't actually really say it. So you can fill in the blank, the definition of insanity, the definition of futility, whatever. But the definition of something is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. So in the most common expression is the definition of insanity. But really, what we have concluded in our work is that sometimes this works. Doing the same thing over again really helps. If you're exercising and you want to, you know, work in a muscle group, you keep exercising that muscle group and you get a result you want. But if you don't like the result, or if you think it's important to improve upon the result, then it's probably important to do something different to try to get a different result. So over time, parents and teachers and students have expressed that they didn't like certain parts of the way homework was being done in Merrimack. And so to us, the answer wasn't, well, then why don't we just keep doing it? We tried to think about a different way to approach that question. Taking these often repeated concerns as seriously as we try to do in Merrimack, we pulled together teams of teachers and administrators to address them. And so this is something that you all know, but it's important to share again in terms of how we got there. So in December of 2016, we convened an elementary standards-based report card committee. And in the course of that conversation about our evolving elementary report card, we talked about, well, what are the things that contribute to a grade? And so among tests and quizzes and projects and so on, it also came up, well, many of us use, some of us use homework. Some of us used extra credit. And so we said, well, why don't we tackle that question and see where it leads us? So we read articles, we reviewed some research, both in favor of grading homework and in opposition to grading homework. But we also reviewed our own goals, and we had lots of discussion, because apart from what other districts do or what research says, pro or con, we have a district that has its own goals and aspirations for its students, and so we talked about those as well. Even though there is no plan for a secondary change in a secondary report card in the near future, we thought that this question about homework was important enough to include our secondary colleagues as well, even though there isn't an imminent change in a report card the way that well, it isn't imminent, but sooner than later there will be a change in the elementary report card. So we convened what I termed a summit. By that I simply mean we pulled together a team of administrators and teachers from middle school and high school in January of 2017, and we met periodically through June of 2017. And we did the same thing, reviewed articles, looked at research, pro and con, reviewed goals, and had discussions. And we worked very much the same way that we did with the elementary folks to talk about, well, what are our current practices and what is it that we kind of want to look at and question. And so over time and after a lot of discussion, we began to identify some sources of parental and teacher concerns and attempted to define our outcomes. And so these are just a few of the outcomes that we determined, and we have a part two as well. So I'll read them, because for the audience who can't see, I think it's important for them to understand what were some of the things that we were shooting to improve. We thought it was very important that we tackle the issue of grade inflation and grade deflation. And I've talked about this with the board before, but it is a fact pretty indisputable that if homework is graded, it has an impact on a grade. And the question then becomes, is the impact on the grade reflective of what a student can actually know and be able to do when they're called upon to do it in a natural setting? Just, can you do this, can you not do it? Without prep, without planning, just can you do it? Some people say that kids aren't able to do that very well. Some have test anxiety, and so we talked a lot about what are the other ways that a student can demonstrate what he or she knows and is able to do, and that involves projects and individualized assessments. But at the end of the day, we recognize that the tendency to do something you're asked or not do something you're asked, while really good and reflective of other qualities, doesn't necessarily reflect what you know and are able to do, particularly when you can't control the conditions in which it's done. Another outcome was increasing the alignment between a grade and a student's actual performance. We see this often happen as students go up in the grades, and it's not just unique in Merrimack, but I'll speak about Merrimack. So sometimes what happens is students in the middle school might have maybe pretty good grades, and then they go to the high school, and then there seems to be a drop. And then there's a question as to how could this be? My child was doing really well here, but not so well here. And then the question sometimes then becomes, well, was the way the performance was assessed at the middle school actually, does it align with what they actually know and can do? And sometimes that gets revealed in high schools, and sometimes if the high schools continue to use homework, then it gets perpetuated in high schools. And then we hear that story in college. We get kids coming back and saying, I don't know what to tell you. I was doing really well in middle school and high school, and now I'm in remediation in college. And so we really want to try to increase transparency to be able to tell a student or a teacher or a parent just, what is it that your child actually can do, and not hide it or fudge it with other ways to manipulate a grade. We talked a lot about the importance of supporting independence and personal responsibility. A lot of times when I speak to parents or community members, they often will talk to me, as I've shared with you before, they'll often talk to me about, in the real world, and this is what happens in my profession, in my business, and what have you. And really what they're talking about are some of the I think what folks in business call the soft skills, the ability, for instance, to show up to work on time, the ability to look somebody in the eye and have a conversation, to be able to present themselves well, to be able to manage their time on their own. Those are the things that we hear from business partners frequently they look for in students. And so to incentivize doing something which is really in the student's own best interest seems counterproductive to supporting independence and personal responsibility, meaning I'll only do it if you give me something for it. There's also the question of limiting, trying to limit the variance of experience. Sometimes you could have a student at the high school who has 5 different teachers and 5 different ways of looking at homework and counting homework. So if I'm, however you want to slice it, lucky enough or unlucky enough to have every one of my teachers, calling homework different, then it depends on who calls it worth the most and which class I do the best in, to have it sort of connect so that it makes a difference for me. But then I could have another teacher who calls it worth nothing, or my friend is in a same class or in the same department, but has a teacher who calls it worth something else, and then there's just a lot of variance. And so who you have makes too much of a difference in terms of how the grade gets calculated. And so we've tried to limit that variance, or thought that that would be an outcome that we should shoot for. We also thought it was important to use to enhance the predictors of future success or future challenge. Again, it's very important to parents particularly, and to students and to teachers, to be able to know what is it that I'm giving my next year's colleague. If I'm a 7th grade teacher, what really is the qualities, what are the qualities of the student that I'm giving to you next year? Can they really do X? Can they really do Y? If they can't really do X and really do Y, what are they not really doing well enough so that we can help them? And if we mask that in some way, it seems like it doesn't provide the information that a teacher needs to really build and leverage future instruction. It gives a parent a real idea of what they're dealing with. Does my child need extra help? Does she not? What's my role as a parent? We also think it's very important to try to achieve an outcome where we ensure that homework is used as a basis for modifying instruction. We talk a lot in Merrimack about not cookie-cutter instruction. So sometimes if you assign homework and review homework in the quote-unquote proper way, it can tell you information about what students need for remediation. That is, what is my student not doing so well, and how can I remediate them? And sometimes, based on how a student does with well-assigned and well-documented homework, ways that they can be extended and pushed. And so we wanted to review those practices as well. And then we thought it was really important to align with the current policy. And there's been some question about the difference between a policy and a protocol, but the fact is the policy to date has never changed. The policy is the policy. And so I thought that it would be important, and again, I don't love to read slides, but I think this might be important for those folks who might not be able to read this at home. So if you bear with me, I'll read this. This is the current Merrimack School District homework policy. Homework is a constructive tool in the teaching, learning process when geared to the needs and abilities of students. Purposeful assignments not only enhance student achievement, but also develop self-discipline and associated good working habits. As an extension of the classroom, homework must be planned and organized, must be viewed as purposeful to the students, and should be evaluated and returned to students in a timely manner. Teachers may give homework to students to aid in the student's educational development. Homework should be an application or adaptation of a classroom experience and should not be assigned for disciplinary purposes. A teacher shall carefully explain to his or her students how homework assignments relate to the grading system. And by that, we extend to mean, and if it isn't going to be graded, understand that it won't. But I want to point out that this policy, because there's been, and I'll talk a little bit later about this, there's been quite a bit of misunderstanding dating back to last September, that now that we have said that homework isn't graded in Merrimack, that must mean that Merrimack doesn't value homework, and there is no more homework in Merrimack. So wherever the camera is, I will look in the camera and I will say that is absolutely untrue, has never been true, and is not going to be true in the future. Merrimack values homework. Always has, always will, for reasons that I'll continue to explain in a minute. The fact that we're not grading it has no bearing on the fact that homework still matters in Merrimack. So, we also thought that it was important as part of our work to define and explain a rationale for what we mean by homework in Merrimack. And so, again, I'll just read for you. What is homework? Homework is anything that's assigned for practice or that supports future classroom work. Just a couple of examples. And I'm going to just read a couple, but it doesn't mean those are the only ones. Math worksheets, for example, chapter or article readings, anything related to content review would be classified as homework. It's practice or it supports future classroom work. Homework builds subject area proficiency. It matters. It matters. In order to get better at something, whether it's a sport or musical instrument or your subject area content, you have to practice it. And homework that's appropriately assigned by teachers gives students the opportunity to practice that subject area proficiency. It stands to reason. No student in Merrimack would make a sports team if they decided to just play the game and never go to practice. So it should also be understood that no student in Merrimack would do or should be expected to do very well if they're not engaging in the practice that's offered to teachers. And just going to practice doesn't automatically mean that the coach is going to play you first. And so you have to work it. It also supports independence and responsibility. Some have said that it's not possible for even some of our youngest students to understand the importance of independence and responsibility, and that there need to be outside incentives in order to encourage that. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I would bet you, looking at the students who are with us tonight, I wouldn't put money on these students not being able to do pretty much anything that you ask them to do, as long as you give them a good reason for it. And so I would leave that as an open question that our committees are still considering, whether youngest students can gain independence and responsibility by learning the value of homework without an incentive. But I think it would be, I wouldn't want to bid against the students that we saw here tonight. So we made a couple of decisions. One of the decisions was to conduct a trial in the 2017-2018 school year where we would not grade homework. So before I continue, I would just say that in most enterprises, whether it's medicine and healthcare or in the sciences, when one is trying to seek the answer to a problem, you can't assume that you know the answer to the problem until you do some sort of test, some sort of trial. There is really no other way. If someone knows another way, please call me. But I don't know another way to try a new idea than to test it and see how it works. And so we conducted a trial in 2017-18 for no graded homework. So I just want to talk about, what did that mean? Homework is still important in Merrimack, and it is still going to be assigned. All skills and content will be assessed, and homework is a good preparation for that assessment. So let me just stay there for a second. All skills and content will be assessed. What you're taught will be assessed. And the best kind of practice is one where a teacher assigns, according to our policy, a differentiated set of homework assignments for a student to learn the content and skills based on what they are really good at and what they need to work on, so that they can then come back into class and then provide a evidence of what they know and are able to do on a variety of assessments that are geared to their best way of showing. Because we know that the best way of showing what you know isn't always just a paper pencil test. And so that's been continuing work that we've done in Merrimack for years, is trying to help our teachers to understand what is a good kind of assessment based on a learner, an individualized learner in a classroom. No graded homework means that there will be no specific grade attached to the homework and or added to a quiz, project, test, or a final grade. A few other decisions. What does this not mean? Not graded homework. What does this not mean? It does not mean that there's no more homework in Merrimack. It does not mean that it doesn't matter if I don't do homework. It doesn't mean that teachers will not hold students accountable for work they did not practice. They still will. And it doesn't mean that students' grades will not be impacted by not doing homework. You'll see some evidence in a minute from a survey that we recently conducted where some teachers report that students were shocked when a quiz was given the day after a homework assignment because the students hadn't completed their homework and thought, therefore, that it wasn't allowed for a teacher to assess it. This gets to the theme of the night, which is that there persists some pretty significant misunderstanding about the goal of this, which I'll speak to about in a minute, which I've also shared with you in the past. I take responsibility for. As critical as I might sound of some folks, teachers who aren't fully embracing this, I said it to you before and I say it again. That job lay with me, and I clearly did not do an appropriate, complete job in communicating that to teachers. So inasmuch as it is the responsibility of teachers to implement this protocol in the appropriate way, one can't ask a teacher to do what they haven't been as fully taught or explained as they ought to be, and that lies with me. However, students shouldn't be shocked when they are held accountable for work that's been assigned, and they ought to know that their grade will be impacted every bit like a student. We saw Sarah Heimberg a few weeks ago, who is a very successful student in her musical instrument, and it will surprise nobody that she, on her own, practices night and day in order for her to get where she's going. And we have students all around Merrimack who do the very same thing all the time. And so it should be no surprise that the same thing applies for schoolwork as well. So we engaged in an assessment of this trial periodically throughout the year, and I'm just going to describe a little bit about that. In the winter, spring of 2018, I met with the faculty at each of the 6 schools to discuss the protocol and to address questions and concerns. Now, in retrospect, it might have been better to do that starting earlier in the year, and that's certainly something that I have to contemplate. The reason that I didn't made sense to me at the time, perhaps in retrospect it didn't, but was that it was important to get a semester under our belt for teachers to even know what questions they had or what their experiences were. And so in this winter and spring of 2018, having had some experience under their belt, I went to all 6 schools and expressed the protocol, expressed the goals, much like I'm doing with you tonight, and then accepting teachers' questions and concerns and trying to address them as best I could. On behalf of the committees who worked with me to develop this. So I'm the spokesperson for a group that made these decisions. February 2018, as you know, we conducted a parent-teacher survey, and I reported the results to the board on February 19th, and that was the survey that we were aided in the development and the review of with Learning Innovations West Ed. And then in May 2018, we conducted a teacher survey in grades 5 through 12 in ELA and math. Why 5 through 12? Because in my conversations with the elementary faculty, it became pretty apparent that for the most part, elementary folks don't seem to have as great a concern about this protocol as upper grade colleagues might. In many cases, they never counted homework in the first place, and so this was much ado about nothing for many of them. Not all of them, but for many of them. And an argument could be made that as you get up the grades, the stakes get a little higher, and ELA and math are 2 of the most important, not the only important, but 2 very important and tested areas, and so that's what we focused on. So I'm just going to share with you just a little bit of data here. The average, the question was asked, in the year prior to the implementation of this protocol, how much did homework count in your 2 content areas? So the average in math at the upper elementary school was worth 16% of a quarter grade or a final grade. And in math at the upper elementary school, just a little less, 15%. So that's not an insignificant amount that homework counted. We asked them to provide comments to specific questions, and so I've just given a smattering of those. And again, because the font is a little small, I'll read them. And I want to preface this by saying I am not, as I think you'll see, I'm not sharing with you only the good ones. Some of these were a little disappointing for me to read and a little hard to share with you tonight, but we're trying to be honest and open. So here it is. We need more in-class practice time for skills. Students are less likely to do it if not counted. Students believe they don't need to do homework because it doesn't count. Some kids have developed such an attitude about not doing any work. If I want a true grade, it stays in school. More conferences to check in on work completed. I have changed the way I look at the meaning of homework. Is it purposeful? Students do not care about the benefits of doing optional work. Now remember, this is just the reflection of some teachers. So when they say students, please don't read that every student. This is not true of every student. This is just what some teachers in their limited range, in other words, the students they deal with, would be reporting. But I think it's interesting to point out if I want a true grade, it stays in school. One of the things that if you look back at our outcomes was, yes, we want a true grade. We want to be able to have an accurate reflection of what a student does. And so a teacher there is suggesting that a true grade is one that the work of which that's graded stays in school. The middle school, the average percent of homework counted toward grade in math the year prior to the implementation of the protocol was 21% of a grade was due to homework. I'll read you their comments. Parents still think homework doesn't count. There's still lots of misunderstanding. A general sense that homework isn't important. Only graded assignments are important. Communication needs to be transparent and abundant. It is very important to practice what you learn on a daily basis. Pre-algebra kids will not practice skills unless graded, but the majority of algebra kids will. I cannot force students to practice the content and skills I teach without the carrot of grading it. Students and parents are focused on the grade students receive, not whether they understand the content. Students are commenting that they are not going to do the homework because it doesn't count. Higher achieving students do complete their homework. Subs are misinformed. I think it's interesting, the reference to the carrot of grading. One of the things that we talked about in our various committees was issuing incentives for engaging in work that's good for students. The idea of grading as an incentive runs into some trouble, especially when we know that for a variety of reasons, not all teachers in our district and in other districts are actually grading the accuracy of the homework. So a student will complete homework, get checked for having done it, but could theoretically have everything wrong, but still get credit for having done it, and now you're practicing the same mistakes and not being able to accurately reflect what you know and are able to do, but your grade looks better than it did before. That's one of the problems that we identified early on as something that we wanted to try to address. For English, in the year prior to the implementation of the protocol, the average that homework counted was 15%. And I condensed the comments from the English teachers at the middle school to this because they were very much of a theme. The completion and quality of homework has declined in the past year. Students are less motivated to do their homework if it will not count. We'll move to the high school. The average percent of homework counting towards a grade in math in the 16-17 school year was 8%. Comments. This year I've taken more class time to have the students practice since students are not completing the assignments. There is no one-size-fits-all policy that works for everyone. I did homework as a credit towards grade if completed, up to the, and yet it was up to the student to check for accuracy. They still need to know the material, and they could not go back and do not done homework to improve their grade. I've seen little change in overall completion rates. Some students haven't made the connection to practice equals mastery equals credit earned equals graduation. As we move forward, I'm hoping we can work on fostering the practice equals mastery connection and foster intrinsic motivation. Students need more autonomy, choice, and control over their academic life and can learn about action or inaction and consequences to improve decision-making throughout adulthood. I would just point out something that was really striking to me, and I'm just going to read it again. And I'm very grateful. These are all anonymous. I have no idea who said what. I did homework as a credit towards grade if completed, up to the student to check for accuracy. There's a fundamental, if I can just say, error in that thinking. It's not up to a student to check for accuracy. If that were so, then we'd have to believe that students get it right all the time. Sometimes a student does something and it's a mistake, and it's up to the teacher to check for accuracy and reteach if it's wrong. That's why you do homework. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding conveyed in that statement, and I appreciate the honesty, and I don't know who said it, but I appreciate the honesty, but therein lies some work that needs to be done. And the idea that we're not going to allow a student to work on a competency because they didn't do the homework, I guess that can be a debated thing. Do they earn the right to redo the competency if they didn't do the homework? Perhaps an argument could be made. But the idea that are we seeking to support students' understanding, or are we judging their willingness to comply with a certain action and conflating that with their ability to do subject area work? It's not clear to me what the answer to that is, but it's pretty clear that we need to work on that a little bit. Finally, in English, the average percentage of homework counting toward a grade in 16-17 school year was 16%. Comments: with the implementation of the new homework policy, and I put in parens policy because it isn't a new policy, but there's a misunderstanding among some that it is. I have found that most students use the policy to justify not completing their assignments. Clear expectations and training should be provided for the teachers. Work beyond the classroom would be reading, project work, studying for vocabulary, quizzes, tests, unit tests, or writing activities. This policy had no impact on grading for me, more importantly, my students. Students see homework as optional. Students are shocked if I give a quick quiz to assess their understanding the next day because, quote, you can't grade homework. Seems to set them free from the assignment. Half my classes complete their homework. They already understand the value. Students do not recognize that homework helps with the understanding of the subject. They want to remediate the competency, missing the big picture. So, I think that we have, in this last year, tried hard to provide opportunities for folks to express themselves for good, bad, or indifferent, to reveal some concerns that they have, some misunderstandings that they have, and we've tried to do what we say we do in Merrimack, which is try to have an honest dialogue about it. So the summary would be best said this way. Communication to educators and parents clearly must be improved. Significant misunderstandings persist about intent of the protocol and its relationship to the existing policy among parents, students, and teachers. I guess you can file that under no-brainer, but clearly after a year of working through this and talking to folks and so on, it's clear that that area needs improvement. There are, however, some questions to consider off of that. And again, for the sake of folks at home, I'll just share them. Would the outcomes that I referenced earlier in the presentation, would the outcomes be different if the protocol were more fully explained and understood? Can we accurately assess outcomes until the protocol is fully implemented? How do we balance the original concerns that caused us to engage in this initiative in the first place with questions about this initiative now that it's underway? So these are things that I guess the board has to consider as well. It's certainly something that administration is working on and trying to consider, and our teams who have always been part of this and continue to be part of this dialogue as well. So my goal tonight is based on the best information that I have to provide you with my recommendation for moving forward. And before I just read that publicly, I want to say that it is obviously my job to do the will of the board, and whatever the board in its judgment decides is an appropriate next step, obviously you will have our full support and we will do exactly as you direct. But one of the things that is, I think, my job is to provide you with a recommendation that you can either approve or disapprove. And so my recommendation would be to maintain the current initiative with the following expectations: to engage in an intensive communication strategy, highlighting the goal of the protocol, the responsibility of students, the expectation of teachers to explain and administer, and to involve parents as well. And I conclude that and recommend that primarily because I think, as you see from the teacher comments, there are, I guess it's the definition of all over the map. There are people who have embraced it, who recognize the mastery practice connection, others who still are struggling with it. There will always be levels of disagreement about whether this has value or not, and whether it was a mistake to do or not. But for me, it seems as if there is enough variance and understanding in how this was supposed to roll that we don't actually have the right amount of information yet to say whether it actually worked to achieve the outcomes that we set forth or not. That's my take. And again, that is just one person's take based on the experience that I've had living this in my capacity over this last year. So I leave you with this quote from Lynn Doughty, who is a highly respected CEO in the human services industry. Innovation demands risk-taking, which in truth entails redefining failure, stripping away its power to inhibit. I leave that with you because one of the things that we've tried to share with you over time in a variety of presentations, whether it's been about our focus on inquiry or student voice at August Academy, some evidence of what you've seen here tonight with students being able to speak their own words, not being perfect, sometimes not knowing the next word, but you'll notice the tendency of teachers to not. Mrs. Roswag intentionally said she hadn't prepped them, letting them work through it, and just pointing and causing them to kind of find their own words and make their own meaning. That comes with a price because it doesn't always look smooth and it doesn't always look clean. But that's how learning works. It isn't always smooth and it isn't always clean. And I guess from my perspective, the one thing that I really hope is that as not just in Merrimack, but as educators, we continue to try to build a learning culture where not knowing an outcome entirely isn't a reason to not continue to try something different. However, that sort of concludes the presentation, and I'm more than happy to take your questions that I'm sure you have.
Okay, I saw Naomi, and I saw Andy, and I see Cinda as well, so I expect a few.
Sure.
I have a feeling we could each talk for several hours, so I'll just pick a few of the top points on this one. First, I wanted to thank you. That was a marvelously comprehensive presentation. It brought together the threads of different ones over the course of the year into one place and was actually gave me some new thoughts seeing it all together. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. There were two things that came to mind for me especially. The first is there's one type of data and one data set that you haven't really discussed, and that is the student grades specifically. I don't know, of course, one can't and should not talk about specific students or groups who could be identified, but I wonder whether it would be interesting to look at the means and ranges across the 2 years. So comparing, I wouldn't compare the beginnings of the years because that was the implementation, but juniors last year at this time of year versus juniors now, or the same cohort of sophomores and juniors, and begin to peel apart the numbers of, is it the same number of students who are doing well? Are different students struggling than did last time? Pieces of that sort. I think that would be really interesting. I also thought that I wasn't surprised to see that individuals are still struggling with the concept. We're coming from a world and a district where students and parents and teachers have practiced getting credit for homework for a very long time, their whole lives till this point, and changing the sense of that takes time. I don't know if there are ways we could do it better. There probably are, but that didn't surprise me that that's taking some time.
Okay, Andy, then Cinda.
So just a couple of comments. I mean, obviously, there's no slam dunk conclusion here, except to say that there were a lot of things that could be learned from all the different angles to this. A couple things that you said in here that concerned me a little bit, to follow your recommendation the exact way it was. First is some of the comments from teachers, not that they didn't understand, but sort of the underpinning that maybe they didn't agree with the methodology. So one of the things that we do in business all the time is before you can move to a new way of doing things, you've got to make sure that all the mechanisms to do the new way of doing things are in place, that they're not going to break, so that you can count on what you're down there. So if you're having, within the middle school and the high school, teachers that you can talk about that what the protocol is, what the intent is, but still will sort of, I don't want to use the term go rogue, but it's sort of like use their own belief. To me, until we get to the point where they are all buying into and we can see that they're doing it, it's difficult to find out whether there's really benefits. Because as Naomi said, understanding whether the students are benefiting or not, it's hard to gauge in 1 year. And if you do another year where you really only focus on the communication and the education, unless everybody's buying into it, you're still going to have variables here. Which gets to the point, and you talked about it in terms of incentivizing or incentive or some reason for students and teachers and even parents to want to go into this. We heard when students were here, some were like, I don't like this at all. I want to get a grade for my homework that I did. Other students go, well, it's great. You know, I now have the option of doing the homework or not doing the homework. You know, it's up to me to decide. Well, are the ones that are not getting grades doing the homework anyway so that they can rationalize that they're do better on quizzes and tests if they don't do it? And the ones that have chosen not to do it, are they happy with their decision, you know, with just not doing it? I mean, and I know that one of the suggestions one of the students made was, if a student decides to do a homework, is there a way that they get a benefit to them for just having done it versus a student that makes the choice that maybe they won't do the homework? So to me, there's other dimensions to this I'd like to hear input on, not only from you, but maybe even from staff across the schools, as to way that we could make following into this program meaningful for the teachers and the students. Because it's more than just a shift of not getting grade, it's also the wanting them to want to follow through with it and be able to follow into the way it is. You know, it became obvious in looking at the surveys that not every teacher did the grading, or not the grading, but the correction to give that feedback. You would have hoped that in that sort of methodology that every teacher takes the homework that they've assigned, checks it for accuracy, provides it back to them, works with the student on remediation should they need to make sure that they understand it. Then whether they get a grade or not becomes irrelevant, because at the end of the day they're benefiting. Until I feel that, or at least a direction in that, it's hard. It's hard to really buy into. So, but am I saying go back to grading the way it was? No, because obviously that was a flawed methodology as well. So I guess what I would like to see is some sort of, I don't even know what the answer is. I mean, but some sort of a slightly modified version of what was last year, in addition to the communication improvements, which I agree with. Is there a way that we can give a little wiggle room in these to help a student that chooses to do it, or help a student that maybe needs an incentive to do it to help them through? That's my only.
Can I comment on that?
Of course, you're on.
So I appreciate it, and and I see you're struggling kind of to name the problem like I am in a way. I just want to say just one thing about the buying in. That's a very tricky thing, because at the end of the day, you can't really mandate anybody buying in. I mean, even if you're the quote unquote manager, you can't do that. So I don't know that will ever be resolved. What I would hope and expect is that whether a teacher quote unquote buys in or not doesn't interfere with their willingness to give it a good try, and let the honest administration of the protocol kind of work its way through, so that we could see whether this is working the way we intend it or not. So the reason that I didn't feel like it was appropriate to recommend the modification you're talking about is merely because it wasn't clear to me that the trial was done with enough fidelity to be able to say, yep, it was done with fidelity, we know how it played out, and it didn't play out well, or it played out really well, and so therefore we moved to Plan B. So my recommendation is to continue to try to have more of a dialogue about why what the problems were, problems that teachers themselves raised, parents themselves raised, and students raised, and to say, and this is one way that we're trying to approach it, and can you, now that you understand it a little bit better, even if you don't agree with it, now that you understand it a little bit better, might you be able to engage with a little bit more fidelity? And I don't mean to say that teachers have been wrong. I think some teachers, maybe, I've spoken to some who've been very open with me, they don't like it. And I think they've also maybe been a little bit less open to say, and they're not really following it. And when a student says it doesn't count, I don't know that that every teacher is having a good back and forth and saying, well, you know what, it really does count. Well, let me tell you why. I can't mandate that people do that. I'm not in the classes all the time. So we need to have more conversation about that. But that's something that, you know, I think that we could maybe do better. But there are teachers who said in some of the feedback that they provided, just what you said, could we call it, you know, a certain percent and have that be somewhat of a compromise? That is, obviously, that's the board's prerogative to do. I'm providing you with my recommendation based on my experience, but I certainly don't put my judgment over the board's. That's just how I've come to conclude it.
But my only comment is, one of the things I didn't see in your recommendation is, and based on what you just said, is there a way to measure the effectiveness of the fidelity? I mean, the bottom line is that using communication, working with it, but I think that if we do, as a board, decide to go this direction, we need to have more frequent measurements or check-in to find out how well it's working. Because I think we let this go very long. I mean, we went through the entire semester before we started asking, you know, how is it going? I guess I'd like to know that if we decide to go this, I want to have more regular updates as far as are we getting more teachers that are maybe not buying into it or whatever, but at least following through with it or not. I don't want it to go. My personal opinion is if we go this route again, I don't want to wait as long between check-ins and understanding the effectiveness as we did last time.
Mm-hmm.
Cinda?
Yeah, a couple things. I support the goals of the protocol. I mean, I agree with the assessments based on my experience, which is all of the learning I've done and all the time I spent in school and so on and so forth. So I support the goals, absolutely. And I also recognize that when we together take on something anywhere, actually, you know, that's such a paradigm shift, that to your point, the quote that you put up there is innovation requires that. I mean, scientific experiments, we've heard, you know, children in the past come and talk about how they have to refine their efforts. And, you know, in the business world, we talk about optimization and regular check-ins to be able to do that. So, I mean, that's all part of the problem solving. You know, it's a little bit of that mastermind game. I don't know if you remember that, where you had to get the colors behind the thing. So, I mean, absolutely, to be able to implement something perfectly is not a reasonable expectation. And I don't believe that we expect that of you or our administration, period. So I would much rather, as a district, be willing to forge ahead innovatively than to sit there stagnantly and ignore opportunities that we have for learning, for growth, for realistic assessments in this case, which when you start to look at the opportunities that students will have going forward in the future, and to prepare, most importantly, to prepare our students for the future. And I do believe that that's what it does. This particular protocol is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be able to assess our students in a way that's realistic as it displays the competency, not to overinflate, deflate the grades, and so on and so forth. And, you know, ultimately what that does is prepare them for college, for their professional success. So having said that, the one thing that I would say is the communication is important. I think we have another opportunity come August Academy when everyone is pulled together. I can imagine that that's probably a big area that you're focusing on for a lot of the communication, at least internally. And obviously there's other communications too with students and parents and other stakeholders. But I would say I think it's really important to carefully consider that communication. And I couldn't agree more with the need to have the homework graded and feedback to be given to students, because there's no way, to be evaluated, thank you, to be evaluated against those competencies, as well as anything that they hand in, even if it's not graded, that they're getting that feedback on it. It doesn't become just a free-for-all of busy work for those that do it and those that do not, because I can tell you that I would have a real hard time being able to learn from my mistakes, again, as you said earlier, if I'm not getting that kind of feedback. So I support the continued endeavors to try to optimize the protocol. I would continue to support in order to get buy-in. There's probably a few different ways you could do that, whether it's some small groups and maybe get some honest feedback in smaller areas where, even in focusing on the goals and then asking for the ideas, because maybe there's some other ways or other ideas about getting at our ultimate goals that we might want to consider incorporating in the protocol going forward. And so I think that there's a lot of work ahead here. I think it's probably one of those things, like so many, that will continue. It's never done. This is one of those things that's never completed. It's always a matter of how do you optimize it? How do you make it better? How are we accomplishing the results that we want to accomplish? So I would just encourage you to work internally to continue to get that type of feedback. And, I think that also to be able to get it from parents and students as well.
Thank you.
Those are my thoughts. A little longer than I expected, but you got them.
Yep, thank you.
And actually, you said August Academy, and I put an arrow right next to it, because when you talk about a year of experience with this, now you have a year to refine it. You do that every year. That's exactly what August Academy is, refining your teaching skills to improve outcomes for each and every student. Each one up one is, I've heard it more than one board meeting. So with that, I think you're right. That's going to be the key for adoption, is with teachers. There are those that haven't embraced it out of the gate. One would hope they wouldn't sabotage it because it's not their way of doing business. But I will tell you as a parent, I think the things that you've addressed tonight, I think I've experienced. Kids that came in with their homework, they got full credit, the check, because they showed up with it. And they went over it in class and self-corrected in class. But the teacher didn't go over each paper personally to see if it was accurate. But now they have a grade for it that showed that they showed up. It's like everyone got a trophy that day. So I do understand that. I remember hearing that. Back to school night, obviously I was waiting for the questions from the parents. So I took the 9th grader, my husband took the 10th grader, and we sat through each class as if it was their school day. And I have to say, of all the people I asked about the homework protocol, it was me. That was it. So, and that was in October. So there was 6 weeks of school under our belts already. To that end, I wanted to get feedback on how the teachers looked at it. And there was one that I remembered, and he basically said, when I look at a kid who says I need help, the first thing I did before I offered them help was I checked to see if they actually did their homework before coming to my class. Were they prepared? Are they asking for me to get them through it? Are they asking for me to explain what they tried on their own but didn't fully embrace? He said, because I never did grade homework. It never went into their GPA. But it told me, what level of commitment the student has, what I can do to inspire them to do their best work in my class. That's what the homework did for them. But it never was about their GPA. So everyone took it a little differently. Standardization, I don't think, is a bad thing. When it comes to implementation, I think you've owned where things can be improved. Communication is something we're always trying to improve as a district. That's why we have a committee now. But it's what you're trying to do is consistent with what you've done every year that I've been on this board. Is you took last year's results, looked at what needed improvement, and took steps to improve it. I see this as just one more way of you doing that. Was it done, seamlessly? No. Nothing ever is. Nothing truly brave ever happens smoothly. It's, if you take baby steps, you'll evolve. If you want to take, a dare that could prove great results, sometimes it does take a little trip along the way. I don't know any athlete that learned how to, I don't know any basketball player that could do a 3-point shot at 100% rate the first time they touch the ball. So you're asking to do very, high performance work. And so we do expect that there's going to be a little work going into that. And for those who have institutionally looked at managing their classroom a certain way and knowing that's not necessarily the right way to move the student forward, then there's going to be a cultural change. I don't know any culture that's changed overnight either. So I think we're going in the right direction. The communication and these touch points are helpful to do that. Obviously, when it comes to the teachers, if having the board come to maybe an opening session of August Academy to talk about why we support this, I think that would, that'd be something I'd be willing to do if the board willed me to do it. But, we need to make sure that we're a team. Merrimack School District is a team. The teachers, the paras who are here tonight, the students, the parents, the board, we're all a team. The administration, we're all a team. We're here for the same result, which is to create a positive educational outcome. So we need to do that with a good game plan. You've done refinements to the game plan, so we're here. I'm here to support you. I hope the rest of this board is too. Whatever you need from us to help communicate that from a board perspective, because I know parents definitely look at us as taxpayers and constituents. Definitely willing to do that. But I think you're doing the right things for the right reasons, hoping for the right outcomes. So let us know what you need from us. The data helps, and I think we're in a good place based on what we've learned from this first year. So, and I thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on item number 6? Andy.
So I'm willingly admitting that I'm probably more critical than the rest of the board members are of this, and that's fine. I would like, as you work with your staff and administration, to be, in addition to communications, find ways to try to influence more and not get everybody to line up, but to see the reason behind it, so we can have a really good effort over the next year to truly see if it's successful. Because you're right, we're doing something new and innovative, and I don't want to stop it. But I also have seen some of the chinks in the armor that I think go a little bit beyond just communications and stuff. That's my observation. So I would just, to plant a seed to see if there are other ways that you can put the bumpers up on the alley, so to speak, to help keep people more in the line. That's it. I don't want to disagree with anybody else. That's just my input.
Chris?
My biggest thing with the homework policy is that I find this year it's been very inconsistent, because I have teachers that are grading homework as like a 4-credit thing, teachers that are taking it and like going through every problem and grading it, and then teachers who just aren't grading it. I think if you next year when we go to August Academy, we need to make sure that like the homework policy or protocol, whatever it is defined as what it is, and doesn't have as much wiggle room where you can grade or not grade like the old one did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions or comments from the board? At this point, if we're going forward with status quo, we don't necessarily need a motion because it's a protocol, not a policy. So if we made right, so we should be good. So we're on to item number 7. We're on to the housekeeping portion of the program, which is summer board meeting dates. So in your packet, you will see a calendar and a note to us about a couple of dates in the summer where We would normally have 2 meetings a month during the school year. We usually do 1 a month during the summer. I wanted you to check your calendars to see if those dates work for you. So far, I'm getting thumbs ups and a definite maybe.
I'm hearing a moan. There's a moan next to me.
The 20th will be okay for me, but there's still, I'm iffy on the 16th.
Okay.
I'll do everything I can, but there may be some pre-existing plans that I have.
Okay. So we will go with them for now. And we're on to item number 8, which is the request to hire at will, and I'll turn it over to Marge.
Thank you. So this is a practice that we put before the board every year. We've done this for the last few years, and it's helped us a great deal. So given that we have 1 meeting per month in the summer, what we really are asking is for the board to give us permission to offer conditional contracts to potential positions prior to the formal election by the board. And what that does is ensure that we don't lose a really good candidate to another district. And then, obviously, I will go forward with a nomination page for you to do proper nomination at either of those. But in the in-between, we would hire the person at will. So I do need a formal motion on that.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to allow the superintendent to hire at will for the summer months. Andy?
I move that we allow the superintendent to hire at will during the summer months.
Is there a second? Seconded by Naomi. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. And we're on to the approval of the May 21st, 2018 minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Made by Cinda, seconded by Naomi. Edits, and I see Chris is our first online.
Yeah, on line 202, Sarah Heimberg is a junior.
Oh. Oh, she is definitely not a senior. We're going to keep her right as long as we can. Were there any other edits? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. On to item number 10, which is the consent agenda, and Mark.
Thank you.
His old seat.
Thank you. Under consent tonight, we have the following teacher nominations. Carissa Ackroyd, grade 4 teacher at Mastrocola Elementary School, and Kyle Morrill, social studies teacher at Merrimack Middle School. In addition, we have the following educator retirements and resignations. Susan Rattel, Merrimack Middle School Family and Consumer Science teacher. Carolyn Johnson, Merrimack High School English teacher. And Gregory Butler, Merrimack High School Science teacher.
I'll entertain Andy.
My mic's still on.
Yes.
I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second? Seconded by Cinda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. Item number 11, other. First is correspondence. All of you have correspondence at your place settings. You see 3 applications for the open position on our board. They are Brandy Nunez, Jason Brodsky, and finally Nicole Laporte. Originally, we had planned to meet as a board on the 12th for interviews, and one of the candidates has required work travel and has asked for a change. At the time the request came in, we had 2 candidates. The third came in over the weekend, and we were looking at targeting the 18th before our meeting. That's not going to work for us to have 3 interviews, deliberation, and a vote. So with that, I'm hoping that you can check your calendars, look at June 19th or 20th to have interviews and an open public meeting, because that's the other important thing. We have to have a venue where we can have a public meeting. Are either of those dates workable for you? And if you say both, that would be easier for me if you could. Go ahead.
Just to make sure we're looking at the same calendars. That's Tuesday and Wednesday, I
Yes,
believe?
the Tuesday and Wednesday after our next meeting.
Okay, they both work for me.
Excellent. Cinda?
As of right now, they both work, but I do have a tentative business trip that I may have to take that week.
Okay.
So I'll keep you posted and see if that gets nailed down over the next couple days. But
Okay. Andy? Both work? So on that, I will reach out to both candidates, try to find what date works for both of them. Our goal is to have the interviews at the Memorial Room where we met Naomi. Yes, we want to get them. Did I say all three? Did I say both again? I did not mean both. That's why you all looked at me weird. Okay, that's got it yet. It's been a long night and it's still going to go. So on that, we want to make sure all three candidates can be there at the same time, get interviews in succession, deliberate, and vote in the proper candidate to join us. So on that note, I will reach out to them this week. I will let you know what date is nailed down, and we will properly secure the facility and post the meeting when we do. Andy?
Just a quick observation. I know that the town council went through this about a month ago when Jackie Flood resigned and they interviewed. They actually had to split it among 2 nights because of availability. So I guess if you can't find consensus on where we can be here or they can all be here, we look at potentially doing that so we don't drag it out too far.
Sure.
And try to do it that way. And then, but let the candidate that couldn't be there that night know when we're deciding. Because I think the way they worked it is somebody couldn't be there that night. They did a follow-on sort of a memos summarizing their discussion. So
Right. And the other thing we were thinking about as well is if we did deliberate on the 18th, because when we had the 2 candidates who were looking at the 18th, every one of us had the opportunity to have a proper orientation before our first meeting with administration to go over the proper flow of a meeting, the rules, and everything else. So we were also concerned that would put them in a precarious position to sit at a board meeting that they've never actually engaged in without any proper orientation. It would be an unfair introduction to the board to them. So with that, I think that we're doing the right thing for all involved and getting the candidates the proper guidance before their first meeting by doing it this way. So with that, if it's agreeable to you, I will keep you all informed of the date, make sure that the room is secured, and that the meeting is properly posted. So thank you for your flexibility. Is there any other correspondence to come before the board? Seeing none, on to comments. Are there any comments from the board? Is the board bored? Oh, you do? Yes. Cinda. She's good. We're good. Okay. Okay. Is there any new business to come before the board? Maybe Cinda?
I just had a request that I'm hoping we can put maybe on a future agenda, but just to kind of throw it out there from everyone. And it has to do with the summer schedules, particularly for the middle school and the high school, the summer sports schedules and band schedules. And my request is that we can get those out ASAP onto our websites. And then going forward, if we can try to wrap up those schedules as close to when we release the new spring calendar as possible, because I know a lot of parents will use that as they try to plan their summer vacations, and I think it's even more particularly of a more interesting transition or a more difficult transition when you're going from, let's say, the middle school to the high school, as far as assumptions on when those dates are for certain events that happen before the start of the school year. Yeah. So I would say, for the best interest of our families, I'd prefer that we're able to get those published as soon as possible.
Yeah, I will say the band families get them at the end of the prior year because they also get the marching band music that they have to practice before band camp. So you have to know before you even leave school because you have to have your sheet music before you leave the last day of school. So even 8th graders, when they're enrolled for the freshman band, will get their music. And I think it's Avatar next year.
Yes, James Cameron's Avatar.
There you go. So another interesting movie theme. So good times.
So it may be mostly an issue
mostly
with
sports, yeah.
With the sports.
Definitely.
And that they vary between sport to sport, coach to coach. So, I mean, that would be something to have the athletic director, maybe try to iron that out. But I'd like to see it published as soon as possible and as close to when we publish our actual calendar, if that's possible. But again, maybe a subject for a future meeting, but I wanted to put it out there.
Excellent feedback. Thank you. Are there any committee reports from the board? I have two. They were back to back. So on the 29th, I started my evening at the Greater Woods Subcommittee. And we thought we had a scout that wanted to redo the outdoor classroom for his Eagle project, and decided not to do that. So we are still looking for a scout that maybe looking for a project that would like to do the outdoor classroom. There's another one that's working on the school loop and doing an outlook on the school loop, which will be good for educational purposes as well. But that outdoor classroom is in disrepair at this point. It's beyond usable. So anyone that would want that, it has a lot of great benefits. So we would be very interested if a scout's looking for a project to reach out to the Greater Woods Subcommittee. Just to clarify, the school loop is partially on school property and partially not. The outdoor classroom is on town property, so they would not come to the district at all. They would definitely go to the Greater Woods Subcommittee, Conservation Commission, Town Council. So I wanted to clarify that. And then went on to the district parent group, and it was actually very well attended. It was a packed house, 16 people across all 6 schools. So all schools were represented, and we did a review of the year with their fundraising activities, what's working for them, what's they're looking to improve, trying to measure effectiveness, excuse me, sharing ideas. But the one thing that was consistent is a need for more volunteers. And these district parent groups work very hard. And I think a lot of parents with kids in the district, they think they need to get to volunteer, be part of the entire organization, be involved in everything. When you get started in one, you're going to be involved in all. You can set your expectations with the district parent group. If you can spend time at one book sale, at one field day, that's time. Those are hands they need to help lift. So if you can give just even a couple of days of your year, it would really benefit those district parent groups. They work very hard to make the school a better place for students. The artists in residence, playground elements. This year, Thornton's Ferry, was it Thornton's? iPads. MES, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, MES. So MES gave us $19,000, and we had to have a public hearing because they gave us technology for our classrooms with their fundraisers. So a lot of good comes from their work, and they need a little help. So I'm, as a personal, plea, if you can even give 10 hours a school year, it's 10 hours that they will greatly appreciate. If you can do 5, they'll take every minute you can offer. But they're setting realistic expectations to share the wealth of the responsibility. So whatever you can do, contact your local school, your child's school, and they can get you in touch with the district parent group, and they can tell you where the needs lie. So it was a great night. And those were my committee reports. So if there are no others, we're on to item number 14, which is public comments on agenda items. We started with the packed house. We now have an empty one. We'll take a moment to sign the manifest, and we will go into non-public. I will entertain a motion to go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, A, B, C, and D. I used my old one, sorry. Made by Cinda, seconded by Naomi. Naomi, how do you vote?
In favor.
Cinda?
In favor.
Andy?
In favor.
And I vote in favor. The motion carries 4-0. Thank you and good night.